want to start by thanking everyone for joining us today for the Senate Education Committee meeting. I want to draw those that are attending, committee members, and those that are listening, I want to draw attention to the fact we had last week scheduled that we would be meeting tomorrow as a committee. That has been modified. We are not meeting tomorrow, but we will be working Thursday. And Thursday, what we will be doing is we will be working on bills. So we don't have a hearing schedule, but we will work the bills that we've heard, that we heard yesterday, as well as if it's the will of the committee, and we'll consider working on the House bills that we're hearing today. So if any of you have amendments, tomorrow's your time to make sure you get them done with the revisers. So at this point in time, I'd like to open the hearing on House Bill 2085. It's creating the Students' Right to Know Act. And if we could have an overview from the reviser, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, committee. House Bill 2085 would establish the Students' Right to Know Act. This act would require the Kansas State Department of Education to ensure that each student enrolled in grades 7 through 12 receives the following: the degree prospectus information published by the State Board of Regents, the Kansas Training Information Program report, and any other information relevant to understanding potential earnings as determined by the Department of Labor and potential earnings published by each branch of the Armed Services. The bill would authorize the department to enter into any necessary agreements to implement the provisions of the bill, and the bill would take effect on January 1 of 2022, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Committee, what questions do you have on House Bill 2085? Senator Petty.
Just keep trying. I'll come up.
You certainly may. While the Senator Petty is finding the bill, we'll move to Senator Dietrich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is this the bill that was passed out last year in the House?
I am seeing a nod of heads. So
maybe when
perhaps the reviser could tell us, did we know what the vote was on the House last year as well as this year?
I have the vote for this year in front of me. It was 123-0. I will have to go back and check on last year and get back to you.
Okay. I'm positive we heard this in House Education. Yes. Okay. Very good. Thank you.
So there we go. So we've heard this before, at least on the House side. It did not come over to the Senate side. Okay. Senator Petty, are you able to find it?
I did. Actually, I had it. I still was not. I'll keep trying. I'm still not okay. Up here. I guess I would need to go back. I did want to ask because
Is your mic on? I'm just checking.
It is. I'm just talking to it helps. So on this, Madam Chair, on this, each student's parents, the degree prospectus information published by the State Board of Regents, can the reviser refresh my memory as to what is the degree perspective?
I think the reviser could, I think that is really going to be more for our proponent to tell us, unless our reviser is really wanting to go into that.
I am happy to let a proponent speak to that.
That's fine.
I think that would be more appropriate. Any other questions of the reviser? Give us that date again. Is it by January what?
The bill would take effect on January 1 of 2022.
Thank you very much. Okay, at this time, we will call our proponent testimony, Steve Green, Opportunity Solutions Project. Welcome to the committee, Steve.
Thank you for having me, Madam Chairwoman. Just as a background, there was concerns last year with the bill that was on the House version, specifically fiscal, because of the way it was written, and we think that we addressed those concerns, and so we were happy to see it pass without any opposition this year on the House side. So my name is Chairwoman Baumgartner and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of House Bill 2085. My name is Steve Green. I represent the Opportunity Solutions Project, which is a nonprofit, nonpartisan advocacy organization that seeks to enhance individuals' path to self-sufficiency. A little bit about 2079, or House Bill 2079 and why it's important, or 2085, sorry, and it's important to me. Just my story, I'm the first out of my family to graduate from a four-year college. I grew up in a blue-collar home. My dad did maintenance. My mom was a certified nurse's aide. And so I just personally see the value in having provided information, and I'll go a bit about what the details of the bill would do. But as you may be aware, student debt is a real problem that's facing United States students. As of September of last year, there was about $1.7 trillion worth of student debt, which is about 8% of the nation's GDP. Specifically in Kansas, the average debt is around $31,000. And a cure of student debt, and sometimes is a necessary thing, and at times it's an unavoidable cost of attaining a degree, but it can also be the result of a simple lack of awareness of personal finance, economics, and failure to plan ahead. Unfortunately, that would be my story of just not able to plan ahead and going into college. And so House Bill 2085 is really simple in what it would do. It helps young Kansans by increasing access to important information, specifically of the cost of college, other training opportunities, and potential earnings data, rather than merely just existing out on the internet, requiring somebody to Google, what are the prospects for a degree in accounting in the state of Kansas, or what would the income look like. This would provide an actual portal that the information would be delivered directly to the students and the parents so that they can make a really informed decision about their future careers. It's smart, it's practical, and we think it's necessary. The issues of rising cost of education, student debt, career planning, and workforce development are not merely a professional matter to me. Again, as the first to graduate from my family, having friends that would accrue $60,000, $70,000 in student debt, only to find out 2 years in that they'd rather be a welder, or they'd rather be a different type of profession, whether it be graphic design, something that I've seen on a personal level. There's kind of the perception that college is how you succeed in America, and that's true, that college education is incredibly important. We just think this provides a really transparent access to information for students. There are multiple opportunities available to young people, and there are ways to optimize the education experience and keep costs as low as possible. They just need to know about them. There are also opportunities outside the four-year bachelor degree program, and with the cost of college growing at a rate that's expansive, and now is the appropriate time that we think that this bill makes sense. We applaud the Kansas Board of Regents and what they're doing to make the cost of education more transparent and provide young Kansans with the information they need to plan and decide their future. I just want to thank you, this committee, for hearing this bill, allowing me the opportunity to provide proponent testimony. We hope you support it. Glad to answer any questions you may have. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Green. I think you already know what the first question is. So step us through, what is the degree prospectus?
Yeah, so the way I understand it is that it's a portal of information that would be provided that not only would have the degrees, so let's take a degree in graphic design or fine arts or accounting, specific degree to something that's available in Kansas. It would also tell a little bit about the cost associated with that specific pathway, but then also, and I may be misunderstanding, but the other types of industries that are available, whether it be, so now my dad was maintenance, but now he teaches at a technical school and teaches HVAC at a local school here in Topeka. It would provide the opportunity for them to also know what would be the income opportunities for that education as far as when they acquire that degree or certification, but also the cost associated with it.
So I guess my question would be, does it differentiate, so someone earns a BSN versus someone that earns the Associate of Arts RN? Does it share that disparity of income?
I believe so, but can I check? I don't want to give you bad information, and so let me make absolutely certain before I say that. Okay.
And the cost of the degree, does it step them through if they are just going to a university, or if they're doing a community college, then a university, or if they're doing a technical college, or does it step through the different options?
That's my understanding, but again, let me confirm that, so that I'm absolutely giving you accurate information.
Committee, okay, we'll go back to Senator Petty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for testifying. I I do understand being the first in your family to graduate. I was the first in my family to graduate from college myself. But I would ask the question, in your testimony, you talked about that this portal would provide families and their sons or daughters with help in making decisions about higher education. And that's, and then you have given some credit to the Kansas Board of Regents. And I think we should also give some credit to our K-12 because they have counselors that have that assistance as well available to students. But I'm not sure we can do anything about changing your mind.
Yeah. No, I think they've been a part of this process, and I think on the House version, they actually provided proponent testimony for this bill, and they've done they have been active participants in this process, and we've appreciated their support. So, I understand and I appreciate the comment. I hope I didn't come off as not thanking them for for what they are currently doing, and then the way they've been a part of this process. So I apologize if that's the case.
No, you gave some credit to it, but I do want to ask, so is this portal that you're referring to, is this a specific company that provides this portal? I'm trying to understand that.
So it'd be something provided through the State Department of Education. I don't know if it wouldn't be, for instance, company John Doe that it just exists out there, that this would be information provided directly by the Kansas Department of Education.
And as you shared with the chair, so that would have a list of degrees and potential cost to achieve that degree.
Correct. It would also provide sort of market analysis or market data as far as what jobs are out there currently in Kansas and specific information related to, for instance, again, I go back to the HVAC, certification. So not only the cost of the license at a local institution, but also the potential earnings that they could make in that degree. I think that's important. That's an important point to highlight, in part because a lot of times people have the assumption that if you do, a blue-collar profession, that maybe you don't make as much as if you're going to go to a 4-year degree institution, which can be the case, but there's also great opportunities, and my dad can attest to the fact that they have just a complete need for HVAC technicians of all professions in Kansas, and that there's really great opportunities income-wise for those types of careers.
Just as a follow-up, so are you proposing through this legislation that I'm trying to decide here. Are you proposing not just a 4-year program, but are you proposing through this that the State Department of Education should have a portal that lists all potential degrees available, or associate degrees, as well as 4-year degrees?
Correct. It's all available information can be made available pertaining to the next steps for somebody that's going through high school. So it wouldn't just be limited to just 4-year degrees at a classic, undergrad institution like a Kansas State or University of Kansas, that there'd be other professions that wouldn't be caught in that 4-year degree that would also be available. And the point again is for that they can have the access to the information directly provided to them so that they can see what the opportunities are, the costs associated with it, but also the income potential so that they can sort of make a fully informed decision on their next career path. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I'm assuming that you're proposing here that it should be the State Department of Education's obligation to make sure that every family has only one place that they need to go to get all this information, instead of their personal responsibility to do the research for that.
That's exactly right, and I'm sorry for not making that clear. Yeah.
This time I'm going to pause, and I see that we had proponent written testimony from Dr. Blake Flanders, President and CEO of the Kansas Board of Regents, and he has signaled that he would like to respond a little bit with regard to those questions that have been asked so far. So Dr. Flanders, you want to jump in and give your perspective?
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Chair Baumgartner. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Yes. So the degree prospectus is a tool that we've developed, and we're working closely with the Kansas State Department of Education through our coordinating council. Right now, students and certainly this isn't my area, but students at the K-12 level, beginning in 8th grade, as you know, have an individual plan of study. And that individual plan of study, I believe they have multiple vendors, but or that you can have a homegrown system as well. A student goes through and really charts out, career aspirations as well as what the plan would look like to get to the end of that road, if you will. What we have proposed and what this legislation would codify is essentially including this information that we've developed at the Board of Regents within that plan of study. So here's what we have. For the short-term certificates, certified nurse aide, some of those, as you know, that you've been familiar with through the Senate Bill 155 program, our agency publishes the Kansas Training Information Program. And that was a report that was required by the legislature. We have all the information for those programs. But for the degrees, where there's going to be additional time and typically additional cost, we've really produced a one-of-a-kind tool that's really unlike any that I've seen in the nation. So rather than really a price calculator that many of you've seen that really generally says, well, we've done some research on some jobs, here's what we think you can earn. We actually use the data from our actual graduates, and we have their earnings after they complete their degree and also 5 years into the workforce. So you can see what trajectory they're on. Now, what information do we have? We have every degree program in our technical colleges, our community colleges, and our baccalaureate level institutions. So that question about, do we know the difference between a BSN prepared nurse and an associate degree RN prepared nurse? We do. We have that information. Not only do we have employment information, but we also have what the program cost the student. So sometimes, you'll see a published tuition. We actually know what the student paid. What are those housing costs as well? And then along with that, what did the average student receive in terms of scholarship awards? So a student can see here's kind of what the average is in terms of how much this is going to cost me. We also have in the tool the ability to show what the cost would look like if you completed in 4 years or longer. And with the community colleges, obviously 2 years and longer. So you have a toggle switch, if you will, and you can really show that your costs can really be reduced if you complete your degree on time. So we think that is really an important part of the tool because that can help drive student behavior. We know that counselors right now in the high schools are certainly helping students with careers. I will tell you from what I've heard, I've never been one, but the counselor's job is incredibly large, and we just want to give them they're dealing with a lot of issues in the high school with students. We want to give them another tool where students can access that information on their own with their parents. And this may not change somebody's mind. You have to have a passion for what you do. So this may not change somebody's mind, but they can compare institutions. They can compare different degree fields within institutions, and you might finance your degree differently if you know what you're going to earn. So it's interesting. I don't know if this is still true, but the first year that we had the earnings data, the individuals that made the most after they completed their degrees was actually the electric line workers. They had the highest salaries, and that was just a 2-year degree. So you can't always, now the engineers obviously earn really well once they're into the degree path a couple of years, but you don't always know based on length of degree which degrees produce the most earnings. So I hope that clarifies some of the questions.
Thank you. Committee, are there any questions for Dr. Flanders or for Mr. Green? Senator Sykes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here, Blake. So this, I'm looking at the ks.gov, and that's been in for 5 years. Have you looked at just the traffic that the site has seen and how it has grown, or making sure that counselors know about this? I mean, I think this is great, and it's basically a marketing campaign for more information, but wanting to know just the history, if you've looked at how it's been used.
Yes,
And
so
Mr. Green, if you have an answer too.
we have, and I don't have those numbers right in front of me. I will tell you that every time we've had a release or there's been a news story, you know, use obviously goes up. We do not have, our institutions publish this on every page that they hand out in terms of promoting their own degrees and certifications. So they show where a student can go to get this link. We just do not have marketing dollars to really market this site. So what Commissioner Watson and I have always felt the best way is to just, as this legislation would require, is just to embed this in the individual plan of study. And then every student is going to automatically have access to this as they complete that individual plan of study and have access to information that's specific for Kansas. So we think that's important.
Committee, any other questions? Seeing none, thank you to both of you for your testimony today, and I will close the hearing on House Bill 2085. We are now going to move to the hearing on House Bill 2287. This will sound remarkably familiar to us because I think this is the third time that we will have some form of hearing on the Kansas Promise Scholarship. So it will be the second hearing that we have this session. So if we could please have our reviser give us an overview of House Bill 2287. It is somewhat different from the version that the Senate passed out, but we are ready for that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. House Bill 2287 would establish the Kansas Promise Scholarship Program, which, as the chair just mentioned, is similar to Senate Bill 43 that this committee heard and worked. Both bills establish a Promise Scholarship Program, but they're not identical bills. And additionally, a version of this bill also passed both chambers last year. So House Bill 2287, as I said, would establish the Kansas Promise Scholarship Program. That program would be administered by the State Board of Regents, and it would, subject to appropriations, provide scholarships to eligible students for up to 2 years to attend eligible post-secondary educational institutions in an associate degree program or career and technical education program in certain job fields and career pathways identified by the Board of Regents. Following completion of the scholarship program, the scholarship recipient would be required to work in Kansas for 2 consecutive years. As part of administering the program, the State Board of Regents would be required to work with community partners to publicize the scholarships, allocate funds for the purpose of awarding scholarships, request necessary information from eligible post-secondary educational institutions, annually collaborate with the Department of Commerce and Kansas Business and Industry to identify up to 10 job fields and pathways that currently have the highest need for skilled employees, and then designate scholarship eligible programs that correspond to those identified job fields and pathways. They would also ensure that any student who receives a scholarship fulfills the requirements of the bill and the program. They would annually evaluate the program and prepare and submit a report to the House and Senate Education Committees. Additionally, the Board of Regents would be required to adopt rules and regulations on or before March 1 of 2022 to implement and administer the program. Section 3 of the bill would establish the scholarship amounts. It also would state that the total appropriation for the scholarships could not exceed $10 million in any fiscal year. The bill establishes requirements to receive a scholarship, and to receive one, a student must be a Kansas resident, be a graduate of a secondary school, or have obtained a high school equivalency certificate within the preceding 12 months. A student would not have had to have graduated from a Kansas secondary school if that student is the dependent child of a military service member permanently stationed in another state. The student would have to complete all the required scholarship application forms, enter into a Kansas Promise Scholarship Agreement, complete the FAFSA, and then enroll in an eligible institution in an eligible career and technical education program or associate degree program. In order to continue receiving the scholarship, the student would have to annually complete 100 hours of community service or work part-time, maintain a minimum GPA of 2.0, and satisfy any other requirements of the scholarship agreement. Section 5 of the bill would establish the requirements for the Kansas Promise Scholarship Agreements that those students enter into. The Kansas Promise Scholarship Agreement would require a student to enroll as a full-time student and engage in and complete the required career and technical education program or associate degree program. It would require that within 6 months after graduation, the student either commence work in Kansas for at least 2 consecutive years or enroll as a full-time student in a 4-year institution. So as long as that student's career at the 4-year institution, when that comes to an end, they would still be required to work in Kansas for at least 2 consecutive years. They would have to maintain records and make reports to the State Board of Regents as required. And if they fail to satisfy the requirements of the program, they must repay the scholarship amount. Section 5 of the bill also provides that any money repaid under that section is credited to the state general fund. The bill would allow the Board of Regents to postpone any requirement of a scholarship agreement for good cause, and it would also establish the ways in which a student who received a scholarship could satisfy the obligations of the scholarship. Finally, Section 6 of the bill would establish a moratorium on the program so that on and after July 1 of 2026, no scholarship could be awarded to any student who had not been previously awarded a scholarship. And the bill would take effect upon publication in the statute book, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Do you have questions specific to this? Yes, Senator Petty.
And thank you, Madam Chair. And Tamara, I think you can answer this question. I was looking back as you were going through the bill back to page 4 under line 28 through 34. So am I to understand that if a student was a Promise Scholar and they completed a 2-year program, then went on to a higher institution and became a full-time student at a 4-year institution, that they would have to continue to report back that they were still in school full-time, and they would also, and then for 2 years following that, they would have to report that they were working in Kansas. So that would mean that 4 years after receiving the Promise Scholarship, they would continue to have to report back, or it would be considered invalid?
So just to clarify, all students who receive a scholarship would be required to maintain records and report as required by the Board of Regents to the Board of Regents, as long as they are subject to the Kansas Promise Scholarship Agreement. The enrollment in a 4-year institution basically allows a student who completes one of these 2-year programs, and if they choose not to start work immediately for 2 years in Kansas, they can go on and continue their education at a 4-year institution. And then just upon graduation, or however they end their career at that 4-year institution, that 2-year work requirement would still apply to them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Committee, any other questions of the revisor? Senator Gossage, and then Senator Dietrich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you tell me how this lines up with the latest announcement from the governor of a committee that she's putting together, or a board that she's putting together with the public-private partnership to do something basically like this?
I think we have conferees that I think
Oh.
have some of our testimony that
All right.
they will address.
Never mind. Thank you.
Senator Dietrich.
Thank you. This is kind of a logistical question, and I don't remember if we talked about this. So we have the $10 million appropriated. We have students who will qualify for the Promise Scholarship if we pass this through. Does the scholarship dollars go to the institution or to the student? And what does that look like?
I think that
I believe the money is appropriated to the Board of Regents, and then they are responsible for distributing it to the appropriate institution, who will then award a scholarship to the student. And someone from the Board of Regents can correct me if I'm wrong, but that is my understanding of how the money would flow.
I'm seeing nodding of heads here in the committee room, so there we go. I'm not seeing any other questions, so let's go ahead and have Heather Morgan, our Executive Director from our Kansas Association of Community College Trustees, come up for our first proponent testimony. Welcome, Heather.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tamara did a great job of overviewing the bill. I'll just add a couple of things. This is the exact same version of the bill that was passed last year. This bill is different from the Senate version in really 3 main ways. This bill does not name the actual fields of study. It allows the Board of Regents and Commerce to work together to do that. This bill is for recent high school graduates only, not for those adults returning to school. And the other thing is the Senate version of the bill says live and work in Kansas for 2 years. This bill just says work in Kansas for 2 years. You can see in my testimony, I talk about, again, this is the last dollar scholarship. The $10 million is going to be at, that's where the fund has established as the limit of $10 million. If this is passed, appropriations still needs to make that appropriation to fill up the fund, as I like to think about it. With that, I'm happy to stand for questions, and I'll address Senator Gossage's question as well. I have notes on that topic. The Governor's Education Council, which Matt Lindsay and I serve on, has been working for over a year to establish some goals and metrics going forward. Yesterday, the governor announced the Advantage Kansas Coalition, which is sort of birthed out of the Governor's Education Council. The coordinating council will be charged to set forth the vision of signature initiatives designed to propel Kansas to have the highest educated and skilled workforce and to be the best in the Midwest in post-secondary readiness and success, preparation for high demand, high skill, critical need occupations, and business expansion, attraction, and retention. Also, the coalition will focus on preparing workers for high wage, high demand, critical needs jobs, expanding public-private partnerships, and it talks about dual and concurrent enrollment, expanding youth apprenticeships, and also a comprehensive assessment to make sure that the workforce dollars in the state are being appropriated in the most efficient way possible. There's not really any new money for any of this. The Governor's Education Council has been meeting for quite some time, and it's a large group. This is sort of just a more focused version of the initiatives that have spawned out of that will continue to move forward along with the Education Council. And I'm happy to stand for any other questions.
Okay, I think that we're going to let the other 2 proponents speak, and then we'll circle around for questions. So I see that we have Senator Petty as well as O'Shea have questions, but we'll get to everyone. Oh, okay. We'll get to them. So next up, we have Matt Lindsay, President of the Kansas Independent College Association. Welcome back, Matt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Matt Lindsay, Kansas Independent College Association. As before, I appear before you as a proponent for this legislation on behalf of the nonprofit colleges. While again, we don't have a plethora of associates and certificates programs. We do have some, and they're particularly important at a couple of schools, Heston College in Heston, Donnelly College in KCK. So being included in this program for us makes sense is in the idea of we should use all of our tools to achieve these kinds of ends, not just public universities and community colleges, but our schools, private colleges as well. I do want to make a couple of items that I think would make this bill better. And some of it reflects back to what we did in this committee before. One is, I think this bill has a community service requirement that is cumbersome. I'm I used to run Kansas Campus Compact. I believe highly in the importance of community service and civic engagement in our higher ed. I don't think this is a easy to administer requirement. I think this creates a bureaucratic hoop that may be more expensive to administer than the rewards we would get for administering it. And in fact, may even catch some students that we want to support that just fail to file the right paperwork. So it creates institutional barriers and it creates student barriers, and I'm not sure it achieves the ends we want here. So I'd recommend actually that we look at getting rid of that. The second is around how this bill identifies or doesn't really identify what fields we want to focus on. My background once upon a time was more in regulatory economics, and this has the potential for what I would call extreme regulatory capture. This doesn't identify what the fields are. It just says Regents of Commerce, find the 10 highest need, highest demand fields. If I'm in an industry that gets identified early in those 10, I'm going to put every effort I can into never getting out of those 10. So we may end up with a program that's not particularly adaptive to new needs because we set it up to not be handled by the legislature to set goals in certain fields. So I found that I would say the previous way that this committee worked it to identify certain needs made a whole lot more sense. To say the legislature says, we know we need health care. We know we needed early childhood, I think this committee just talked about. We know we need those things to succeed in our state. We need IT and information security. I think an approach that is appropriate for the legislature is to set what those are, assess after a period of time, and come back and change them as you go, rather than to sort of let it be determined by an unspecified set of criteria of what is high need and high demand. And it's not a judgment on my friends at the Regents or the Department of Commerce. It's just I've seen this before, and I think we are better off identifying what we think those ought to be ahead of time, rather than letting those emerge and then be captured forever. Those are my two worries about this bill, but even not addressing those, we would support its passage.
Thank you very much. And last up, we have Jason Watkins, Wichita Regional Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to the committee, Jason.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Pleasure to be here. Jason Watkins, appearing for the Wichita Regional Chamber of Commerce. I'll be very quick. The number one issue the last several years for the Wichita Chamber has been workforce talent development. Spoken with this committee and many others several times about the crisis that South Central Kansas, and I think the state overall, was facing just right before the pandemic. And that was the challenge of talking to some of our largest employers who have multiple locations throughout the country saying, hey, we're in Wichita, we're in South Central Kansas, we want to be here. As new projects come on, though, we've got to figure out how we're going to hire people. Huge challenge. And I would submit to the committee, Madam Chair, that I think the best thing the legislature can do in terms of economic development and growing our state's economy is to do things like this bill, because it does help fill that pipeline. It helps create a talented and trained workforce. And the benefits of that obviously don't just go to the employers and to state government. They go in largest part to those people that are able to take advantage of a program like this. So we think this is great legislation. We'd encourage the committee to report it favorably and stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you. We will start off with questions from Senator O'Shea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question's for Ms. Morgan. You very succinctly mentioned the differences between this and the Senate bill, and I really appreciated that. And I was just curious what your opinion was of those differences.
My opinion is I like the bill that can become law.
I understand, but I'm curious.
She's not a politician.
If you could pick your favorite pieces, what do you think is going to be most effective?
I personally think that it's good to define in law that just like Matt said, the areas of focus, the live and work, that was an oversight on the House side. That should be in there, live and work. The idea of adult workers, certainly COVID has impacted that, and that would be great. It comes down to finances. And are we taking a big bite of the apple, or are we nibbling at the apple and then maybe coming back and taking a second bite later? So that's really a policy decision. I think from a clarity of what this body thinks is important in the most in-demand industries, I do like the fact that we know right away we can start marketing the program. We don't have to go through some very bureaucratic process to get to them. But I most like a bill that can become law.
Okay, I have Senator Straub, and then I have Senator Sykes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This question is also for you, Heather. On the point that you pointed out that it's only for current or recent high school graduates, does that allow a student that has taken a gap year or a student that has enrolled in a four-year university and then decided that that wasn't the path they wanted to take and withdrew and then enrolled in a
I think that it says the last 2 years, if I has graduated within the last 2 years, isn't it?
I believe the reviser said, and the reviser will correct me, within 12 months of graduation.
So they would have to then get enrolled. If they took a gap year, they would need to get enrolled right away at that gap year. So June, you know, May to May is your gap year. June, you need to be enrolling.
Okay, thank you. That clarifies.
Other questions? I'm sorry, Senator Sykes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know we've talked about the difference between Senate Bill 43 and this one. This one has a provision that after July 1st, 2026, no dollars are awarded. Can you comment on what you think there? Is a sunset better or to?
The House put that in last year to just be like reviewing the program, just like they're reviewing the engineering initiative this year. It'd be a very similar thing, and that was something that the House felt strongly about last year, that they wanted just to be able to review it.
Could you address, I know that our Senate version, through an amendment, we had reduced the 10 million to the 6 million. Where do you feel we are on the mark as far as funding for that?
We think 6 would be fine. The House wanted to put the cap of 10. I'm realistic that you all aren't going to be the people. We're going to have to go work with Ways and Means and Appropriations, and they're going to decide. Even if it has a $10 million cap, they may only appropriate 6. They may appropriate 2. I hope they don't do 2. But, you know, that's sort of the ceiling cap in an appropriations bill type of situation.
Other questions? Yep, Senator Straub.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is there currently a cap on, well, the CTE, the Senate Bill 155 courses?
So we don't have Jill, but Tamara can stop me if I go awry on how this will work from appropriations perspective. Senate Bill 155 is a line item in the actual appropriations bill, and it appropriates the exact amount of money. The way I would anticipate that this fund would work would be the creation of a fund, and then out to the side it says how much is appropriated for that fund. And if it doesn't have an amount, it usually says no limit in the appropriations bill. So this would say either they'll create a no limit fund in the appropriations bill, or they'll create a fund and just say 6 million, and they'll put the 6 million in there. If they do no limit, they could put anything in there because it's just subject to appropriations. We'll see if I got that right enough for the revisor's office.
I would actually defer to Mr. Scott.
JG, did you want to?
We had JG, I would have deferred.
It's my current understanding, and I don't know for certain, but it's my current understanding that there is no limit on the CT, on the Senate Bill 155.
Well, the limit is the appropriation.
Okay.
And I think to clarify with that, and JG, help us out here, but students enroll, earn the credit, that doesn't mean that that ever actually gets reimbursed to the institutions. So by not having a limit, what that really means is whatever funds are available get tossed in, and oftentimes that's been short. Is that how you see it, JG, or do you see it differently?
No, that's correct. There's an amount appropriated, the services are provided, and whatever was appropriated is all that would be reimbursed. And it's my understanding also, as had been stated, there will be money deposited into that fund, and it could either be a no limit fund, or if there's a limit, if there's dollars put into it, then it'd be limited by the amount of dollars that was put into that fund.
Senator Petty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so since we're doing a little bit of comparison between HB 2287 and Senate Bill 43, could you expand on some of the, within HB 2287, there's quite a long list of things that if you finish a 2-year program and you go on or you don't go on and reporting back. And could you talk a little bit about when it comes from a management perspective, either from the recipient or from the institution, which makes more sense? More requirements or looking at realistic?
In my opinion, rules and regs are going to have to be promulgated for either bill, and the House version is just more specific. All of it's going to have to be going to rule and reg about how the Board of Regents are going to actually administer it. And I'd defer to the Board of Regents on what they think is most administratively convenient, but it's all going to have to go through rules and regs.
And I see movement from our Executive Director of the Board of Regents. Dr. Flanders, did you want to jump in?
Yes, I'd love to just, obviously, we're supportive of the bill. We have written testimony. About 2 or 3 things I'd like to just mention that I think could really help the program from an administrative standpoint. Number one, it'd be very difficult to put the program areas into statute. Industry's changing all the time. We have a robust process that we've used for Senate Bill 155 to determine those high-need, high-wage programs. It works really well. And I think we'd just be reinventing the wheel by trying to put it into statute and then coming back 3 years later, and then we'd always be lagging. So this one time probably disagree with some of my friends there where I would not put that in statute. I would tell you that on Senate Bill 155, we have some, the legislature's been good to appropriate the correct amount of dollars that are needed almost every year. We've had a couple of times when that hasn't been the case, but usually we are very grateful to Board of Regents. The colleges are grateful for that support that's been received. Also associated with that program is that if an individual gets a GED or a high school equivalent diploma while they're in a career tech area, they can receive support as well. So we do have an option there for those students. I have just a couple of thoughts about this. Number one, there is going to be significant bureaucracy created. This will be very difficult to administer on the, I love community service, but just chasing that. And then the requirement that people live and work in Kansas for 2 years always sounds great. We will have to find every student. And that is a costly endeavor. And I would ask the committee just to weigh out those costs. Do you want to spend the dollars there, or would you just want to give the scholarships to students and hope that most of them stay and come back every 2 or 3 years and just have us report how many are staying in Kansas? I would tell you that requirement is incredibly difficult to administer, particularly when they can go to a university for a couple of years. And so then they're continued to be on the hook. I would say another area that you might consider is that there is no prioritization for need. So high income earners could get in line first, and that's what we know generally happens. Those individuals from homes where parents graduated from college, they're more aware of how the whole system works. They will be in line first. The students from disadvantaged homes are typically in line last. And so those dollars may go to populations that don't need as much help, and may not go to the populations that really need our help. So I would just encourage you to look at that component as well as you work through this bill.
Respond.
Those are all policy options. The Senate bill does have a cap on it. So when you go to conference, you're going to work out all of these things. And again, we just want a bill that can become law.
Can you talk to us about, you mentioned Advantage Kansas. Would that be a place to come up with the 10 job fields pathways or?
Possibly. We,
regions?
from our college's perspective, the Senate Bill 155 process has been anything but perfect. And so I think that that's a very important piece of this. The Advantage Kansas Coalition could. I'm more worried about doing it expediently and making this and start marketing it to Kansas students. We know that the college going rate is not good. We know we're losing at Kansas students every day, and we need to get this up the most expediently up and running as we can so that students know that it's available to them and they can live and work in Kansas.
I was curious if, Matt or Heather or even Jason, if you would respond to, so we heard about the 100 hours of community service. What about the requirement to work part-time?
That was something that was added in the House version last year after the technical colleges. They requested that because a lot of times there's an internship requirement or more like an apprenticeship. And so that's in exchange for the community service. Basically, somebody signs off on, in lieu of community service, you've been not playing PlayStation all the time and doing something that's helping you in your future career. So that's why that's in there. I might just address why the military service is in there too. Somebody asked about that earlier. There was a House member who felt really strongly about that to make sure that our military people who might be temporarily duty stationed overseas, that their students could come back to Kansas. So.
Committee, one last question from Senator Petty.
That military piece is in both bills, correct? I'm looking at 43, I'll tell you it is.
You have it in both?
Yeah, it's in both bills, yeah.
That was a big thing last year in the House to get that in there, so. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm not seeing any further questions, so at this time I will close the hearing on House Bill 2287. And committee, again, we are not meeting tomorrow. We will be meeting on Thursday. The intention is that we will work any of the bills that we have heard this week. So the two from today, and if there's a desire to work the bill that we heard yesterday. So thank you so much, and committee meeting is adjourned.